All right, so I've been bullish about the Detroit Pistons for a little bit now. I really am very high on Cade Cunningham. I think higher than most. When ESPN ranked him 64th in their top 100 before the season, I thought that was outrageous, which I think, to be fair, most everybody did, but especially outrageous. Like, that was a disastrous selection and a disastrous placement for a guy who is having an incredible year. And I do believe that the Pistons are truly building something for their future around guys like Cade Cunningham, Jaden Ivey, and then I think a mixture of young guys with a lot of potential and veterans who are solid contributors, guys like Malik Beasley and Tobias Harris. So before we hop into the video, if you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Help me push towards the 2,000 subscriber mark on the channel. I'm uploading NBA content every single day, multiple videos a day. Would really appreciate it if y'all do subscribe. Without further ado, let's hop right into it. So we're going to start off by talking about their win tonight against the Heat, which is a big win and a very important win. Not even like an incredibly, insanely impressive win, but a good one against a good Miami Heat team that's played better as of late. Jimmy Butler had 35, 19, and 10, his best game of the season, and yet they still found a way to win. They held Tyler Hero to a very inefficient 9 of 25. He shot 17 threes and only made 4 of them. Not particularly great there, but it was a good win over a good Heat team. Like, that's the type of win that is good for a building team. Cade Cunningham plays 42 minutes, 7 of 17, 11 rebounds, 18 assists, and 20 points. The Heat were hounding him defensively all night, and he did a great job of making the right play with 18 assists, which is like the third most in the NBA this entire season. Had himself a phenomenal game. Jalen Duren with a 9 and 16. We'll get to Jalen Duren, talk a little bit more about him as this video progresses. I'm not insanely high on him, but Tim Hardaway was 2 of 7 and finished 5 of 11, or 2 of 8, I think, finished 5 of 11. He made like 3 threes in a row in overtime, which was big. I'm not a big Tim Hardaway Jr. guy personally, as a Mavs fan who's watched in the last few years. I don't love that addition, but he is a streaky shooter, and his streakiness certainly helped him in overtime tonight. Malik Beasley with 28 points on 9 of 18, 7 of 13 from 3, has had a great year, been one of their best players. And then Asar Thompson with his best game of the season, having just returned pretty recently from injury. 8 of 14, made a 3, 9 rebounds, 19 points, 4 steals, a block, and a big poster dunk. Had himself a great game tonight. And honestly, Ron Holland off the bench had a good game as well. I know he only had 8 points, but 23 minutes, played good defense, 4 rebounds, 3 of 5, made a 3 ball. Like, it was a very nice performance all the way around for the Heat, and a big win for a team, for the Pistons, and a big win for a team that, again, I believe is truly building something for the future. When you look at the numbers this season, it all starts with Cade Cunningham. He is having himself an incredible year, shooting a little bit less than I'd like. I would rather that 2-point percentage be a little bit over 50%, but he's at 38% from 3 this year on 6 attempts a game. That was one of the biggest, maybe the biggest critique of his game coming out of college, and he has really turned into a high-level shooter, which I believed was going to happen, having watched him a lot at Oklahoma State. When he was at Oklahoma State, my cousin was playing at Baylor, so I watched a ton of Big 12 basketball at the time, and I was really, really high on Cade Cunningham. Obviously, he was the kind of no-brainer #1 pick, and I thought he was going to develop into a star. And he has done exactly that. Been very, very impressive so far this season. Tobias Harris has had a decent year. I wish his shooting was a little bit better. He's shot worse this year than he has for his career. But he's, again, a good veteran leader, a guy who's won a decent bit, and is a guy to have in the locker room to keep this team well-rounded, I would say. Malik Beasley's had a great year. He's shooting 40% from 3. Not a great defender, but at least a semi-decent one, and he's been really, really good. And then Jaden Ivey looks to be, I'm not sure he's the second star on a contending team, but he does look like a very good second star for this building Pistons team at 36.7% from 3 so far this year. Another guy who has improved on the stuff that he didn't do well coming out of college. And he himself is a very capable playmaker, although his assist to turnover ratio isn't great. And that's the other thing about Cade. Turns the ball over too much. That would be by far my biggest criticism of Cade Cunningham at this point. I understand he has a very high usage rate and has a lot of responsibility on him, but I would like to see the turnovers go down. And if that's the one thing that I think he could work to improve. But he's averaging 23, 7, and 9. I mean, he's having an insane year. And again, how old is Cade now? 22, 23? Yeah, 23 years old. Having himself a phenomenal season, his first healthy season in a couple of years, and has been a big, big piece for this team. Now, Tim Hardaway Jr., I don't love him. As a Mavs fan, he's very streaky. He's a non-factor defensively. I don't love that addition, but if nothing else, he is a good veteran, a guy who people seem to like. He's a guy who seems to be a good teammate, hard worker, even if the shot selection isn't great and the defense is almost non-existent. Jalen Duren reminds me a little bit too much of Andre Drummond. If you watch the Pistons, you probably know what I mean. I think he's a little bit of a net nothing player at times. Would love to see more defensive activity out of him, a little bit more rim protection for a guy who's as athletic as he is. but I still think he's going to be a solid player. Now, Beef Stew has unfortunately not had a great year. His shooting ability, which was something that was kind of a little bit of a value as like a stretch big, but also a big dog. Like Beef Stew is a physical, feisty guy. I would like to have seen him develop a little bit more, but I just don't know if there's a long-term future for him as a key rotation player, which is unfortunate. But I like Simone Fontecchio. And then we get to the two guys who I really think are big pieces for the future if one or both of them can figure out a consistent three-point shot. And that is Ausar Thompson and Ron Holland. Ron Holland having a rough rookie season shooting the ball, 2 attempts a game, but only 20% from the three-point line. Now, what he does, super athletic, plays hard at the rim at both ends, not a bad defensive player, has a high ceiling athletically. I mean, he's already at the ceiling athletically, right? But he's got a high ceiling, I think, defensively. And if he develops a jump shot, will be another guy who provides real offensive rim pressure and hopefully spacing as well. If he can develop that. Ausar Thompson had his best game of the season today. Has not played a ton in his return from injury so far this season. Only 7 games after tonight so far this year. But the efficiency has been a little bit better. 30% from 3 this year is a nice improvement for a guy who, again, let's remember, he's 21 years old. He still has a lot of growth to make. And last year, he was an 18% three-point shooter. We will take improvement. 30% may not be perfect right now, but it is definitely a big improvement. And that's something that I think is really helpful for this Pistons team as well. And him especially, his impact defensively and as a rebounder is very impressive. There is a lot of talent there. There's a lot of off the dribble playmaking ability for a wing, a lot of rim attack physicality. He's hard to stop driving downhill to the rim. And honestly, he's only going to get harder to stop as he continues to develop physically into more of an NBA body. Still a young player, still a guy with a ton of, like, a ridiculously high ceiling considering how impactful he is as a defender, rebounder, and passer. If he becomes a good shooter with all the other things he does well, he is going to be a great NBA player, like one of the most important role players in the league. And that's the type of stuff with a core of Cade, Jaden Ivey, Holland, and Ausar hopefully continue to develop. Same thing with Jalen Duren. Good veterans like Tobias Harris and especially Malik Beasley. There's a lot to like about this Detroit roster, and I feel like it sets them up to have a decent future. I mean, when you look at the numbers, Malik Beasley and Tobias Harris, by the way, that veteran impact has been important. I know Tobias hasn't shot the ball great, but they have been really good calming presences, I think, for this locker room, and they've also been the 2 best players on the team in terms of on-off statistics this season, which is really nice to see. Now, my Tim Hardaway assumption is still very similar to where it was. -9 points per 100 possessions with him on the court so far this season. He has not been a net positive for the Pistons, just like he wasn't a net positive for the Mavericks. I don't think he'll stick around long term, and I don't think he should as a guy getting major minutes on this Pistons team. But Ron Holland has been their next worst player, and honestly, again, he's a rookie. He's, 19 years old? He's got plenty of time. Let's be patient. Hope he develops a jumper. Hope he develops more into the NBA game as a whole. Got to be patient with him. But I do like, as a whole, the fact that Cade has been really, really good. Cade has been good on both ends of the court as well. I know his defensive numbers don't look great, but I do think defensively he's had, as an individual ISO defender, he is a good defensive guard. His size at the point guard position is valuable. I really do think he's a solid defender. I think this team's going to be decent defensively, going to be decent offensively, and has the potential to really improve as the season progresses, because look, they're 11-16 after tonight's win. When you look at the East is bad. If they were in the Western Conference, they'd be out of the playoff picture already. But in the East, the Nets are 10-16 and just traded their best player, arguably, and their second best player after Cam Johnson and Dennis Schroeder. They're not going to try to win games. I would not be surprised if they trade Cam Johnson, even though he's having a great year. He's already 28. I wouldn't be shocked at all to see them move him at the deadline as well as maybe Dorian Finney-Smith, and really go full in towards that tank. The Sixers just lost Jared McCain for months, and Embiid will likely be back relatively soon, but they're having a really rough season. The Hornets got LaMelo back tonight and still were awful. Got blown out by the Sixers. They don't look like a team that's ready to compete even for a play-in spot right now. The Raptors are obviously they're tanking ethically, but they're tanking, and the Wizards are the worst team in the East. And then you look at the Bulls at number 9. If they traded Vucevic and Levine at the trade deadline, I wouldn't be shocked to see them slide down the Eastern Conference standings as well. And so what that means is there is a really open spot here after you get to about the first top 7 or 8 seeds in the East for the Pistons to be a play-in team this year. And no, I don't think they're going to be a team that makes a run, gets out the play-in, and is a serious threat in the first round of the playoffs even. But they are building something for the future, showing real improvement this season under JB Bickerstaff, and it's growth. For a team that was the worst team in the league last season, historically bad in a lot of ways, this has to be encouraging improvement for the Pistons, because no, they're not contenders yet. They're not contenders for anything more than a play-in spot. Let's temper our expectations. But This is the type of stuff that you'd like to see for the growth of a franchise that has struggled as much as they have these last few seasons. And when you throw in the fact, just real quickly, let's look at their losses. Indiana, not a terrible team. Cleveland, Boston, as I was saying before, I was so rudely interrupted by my dog. These losses, you look at them, Indiana, Cleveland, Boston, Miami, New York. Charlotte was a bad loss, but then Houston, Milwaukee, Chicago, Charlotte again, not great losses for sure, but then Orlando, Memphis, Philly, not great. Milwaukee and Boston again, then Boston again. Like, these are, for the most part, with the exception of 3 or 4 of these, pretty not bad losses. Like, again, like I said, this is not a team that's going to be winning a championship or anything, but they're showing real improvement. They're playing competitive basketball. They're not losing a ton to these bad teams that they shouldn't be losing to anymore. They're starting to elevate themselves and put themselves at least in contention to be relevant. And that is great progress for the Detroit Pistons. Hope y'all did enjoy this video. If you did, make sure you hit that like button, leave a comment, and subscribe. I'll be back with more NBA content very, very soon, and I appreciate y'all. Peace.